1% of dudes rapping, they ain't nice as me. 98% ain't live the same type of life as me. The judge gave me life and then they sent me where the life is be. That level 4 with depth and vice, the type of stuff they like to see. Two choices, fight or flee. I refuse to die a chump. I never been a mark, but damn, it's scary when that riot jump. I seen dudes cry, get punked, and some sexually brutalized. Knew a dude who lost his life and he was only doing 5 year-long racial fights when homie all you do is ride. Lonely days and nights up in a hole causing suicide. From the moment you arrive, you see the Mexican mafia, AB skinheads with big giant swastikas, pro-black philosophers, the BGF, the Kumi, and Muslims who will murk you from the nation to the Sunni. That MS was loony, quick to ride up on they rival. Even Christians went to church, hide knives up in a Bible. Political and tribal, the Crips and Damus, the Long Beach, the Hubs and the Dubs and the Grooves, the IE, the Bakersfield, the Dago Pyrus, the hustlers quick to roll, the gangsters gon' move, whatever click you choose.
Say what's cracking, YouTube? It's your boy 16 to Life, and I'm back like I'm on a parole violation. Yard down. Now, for those of y'all that's new to my page, in 1994, I got arrested. I was eventually sentenced to 16 years plus life, and I served 24 years straight in the California prison. Yeah, that's me gassing right there on that intro. And if you want to get that song, hit me up on my email, 16tolifemusic@gmail.com, and I'm going to give you the information on how to get it. Now, let's get right into this video. So a couple of days ago, after I did a reaction to a video in which I seen a federal correctional officer who happened to be black talk about a riot that he had to respond to in the federal system between the blacks and the Mexicans. And in this particular riot, the blacks happened to get the short end of the stick. A dude in the comments left a comment and said, damn, pretty much, do the blacks ever win a riot, and do they ever start a riot? So I thought that was a great question, right? And so, of course, the answer to that question is 100% yes, without a doubt, right? But I think that there are many reasons, of course, why he would ask that question. I've been doing YouTube about 5 or 6 years, and I can be very unbiased here when I say that a lot of the times, a lot of the stories told by other individuals who are not blacks definitely try to downplay the blacks, right? And I also think that, to keep it 100, you have a lot of dudes who are not black who are not going to come on here, either whether it's due to pride, whether it's due to potentially having a fallout from whatever organization or race they function with. If they was to come on here and say that the blacks won a riot or smashed in a riot that they was there in at that specific time, because it would make their particular race, it would shed a bad light on their particular race, right? And so I think that that's part of the reason as well. I have seen several riots, and maybe I'll react to them, right? I've seen several riot stories told by other individuals who were not black, talking about, yes, the blacks did win a riot, right? I did see one particular YouTuber who wasn't black tell a story about almost getting into a riot and with the blacks, and then he said something along the lines of, because on that particular day, in the story that he was talking about, I believe, according to his story, his particular race was outnumbered. Like, it was only 12 of them out there, and it was a yard full of blacks. And a riot looked like it was going to jump off, but it didn't. And this particular YouTuber said something along the lines of, man, good thing that riot didn't jump off. That would have been the first time we ever lost. So I think it's because of situations like that put a negative light out there into the minds of many individuals who watch YouTube. Often when I have done interviews with Chances, right, because now you guys may not be familiar with a friend of mine who goes by OG Chances. I have interviewed him, and he started doing time, I believe, in the late 70s. And so he has many stories where blacks did extremely well and I mean, just straight out smashed in a lot of riots, right? The type of individual that he is, though, he prefers really not to put those stories out. He may say we got into it with another race, but just the individual that he is, he doesn't want to look like he's down speaking on any other race, Mexicans, whites, Asians, because pretty much, in his words, I'm paraphrasing here, he has respect for everybody that he done time with, and there are soldiers in all walks of life. So in the event the collective that he functions with happened to get the upper hand one day in a riot for whatever reason, he doesn't want to disparage any other group and making it seem like he's being negative. One thing that kind of trips me out, right, is why people even tune in to these prison shows and want to hear about these race riots and then get upset if they happen to hear their particular race, neighborhood, organization, or whatever it is getting the bad end of the stick, when we know that those are the dynamics of prison. So I think it's extremely foolish for a person to want to watch a prison show and then get upset when he hears about a situation like that, right? I have seen several other, and I don't know if I mentioned this early because I'd done this video, then I stopped, had to go do something. So I may have mentioned that in the last video or early when I started this one. But I have seen different races talk about losing riots to blacks, and possibly I'll react to some, right? I don't have a problem with an individual telling a story where the blacks got the short end of the stick, right? I think the problem comes with many individuals if the teller of the story of the race or the group that won, regardless of whatever race, whatever group or organization he belonged to. I think the problem comes when people listening to the story can detect disrespect or can detect a racial superiority complex to the individuals that's being spoke of in a losing manner. That's where I feel a lot of people get angry, right? I think a lot of individuals, whether they're white, black, Hispanic, Asian, or whatever, when they're telling a story about another faction they went to war with or historically have warred with, it is extremely hard for them to remove the bias from the story. And so of course that bias is detected by the listener, and then if you are of that other organization, faction, gang that has lost, then of course you're gonna get upset, right? So I think that's a rare quality that I have, without tooting my own horn, to say that I can tell a story, I can remain unbiased, right? Now some individuals take things like that personal, and I'm talking about going to war with other collectives, whether it's a collective of the same race or whatever, or a different organization or whatever. Some individuals take that as business. Some individuals take that as personal. For the individuals who take that as personal, then of course their disdain and animosity toward whoever they're speaking about will more than likely be easier to detect. Once again, speaking on my homie Chances. Chances said anytime somebody is trying to hurt him, regardless of what color, what gang, what hood, what organization, what race they're from, he says he takes it personal. He doesn't care. He said he takes it to heart and he takes it personal, right? And so that's Chances, right? And so like I said, he has in personal conversations shared many stories with me, right? Let's keep in mind that I came to prison in 1996, right? When prison was definitely a different beast. And the dudes who were in prison just 10 years, 15 years before I came, they was definitely in prison when prison was an extremely different beast from the time that I experienced, right? So I have talked to many individuals. I've done time with many individuals who are well respected, well loved, especially among Crips and Bloods in this YouTube space where street dynamics and prison dynamics is discussed, right? A good friend of mine, man, and I'm not going to put his name out here, even though I have discussed him and put his name out here before. I don't think he would mind, but just because I didn't get the okay and the clearance, I'm not going to put his name out here. But he's from Compton. He done a lot of time, 30 plus years, and he has told me some stories where the blacks were, the clear victor, and the blacks did initiate also the riot, right? If you listen to Damian Porter, you'll hear him tell stories of the blacks taking losses and also the blacks being victorious, right? But once again, for whatever reason, a lot of times I think when those stories are told by an individual who was in that group that happened to be victorious, you have a lot of individuals, for whatever reason, who want to try to dispel what happened, or want to try to make it seem as if the dude is not being honest, right? And so, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that we can go to the Swang Low podcast. Shout out to the homie Do Rock Creep. And if you scroll through a lot of his stories, because he has many stories up there, and for those of you guys not familiar with the Swang Low podcast, his name is Do Rock Creep. That's an individual who has been currently locked up over 30 plus years, right? And so he has stories on his page where the blacks have definitely came out on top in riots, right? And once again, he is very unbiased when he tells his story, and he keeps things real. But individuals who don't like to hear these stories, once again, why tune in to Prison Stories, right? I remember 4 or 5 years ago, I hadn't been doing YouTube that long. I'm getting ready to go exercise, getting ready to work out. I did a story, right? The name of that story is, I believe, Who Runs Cali Prisons? Southsiders, blacks, or whites? The title was something along those lines, right? And I'll never forget, on that particular day, I was getting ready to go jogging, and I was in the bathroom tying my shoe, and I'm listening to YouTube, and I happened to run across this white convict by the name of Powder. Powder went on to tell us, and I believe Powder happened to be from Lake Elsinore, which is a city in Riverside County. And so Powder was talking about a situation where he was in the county jail, and he said it was 6 or 7 blacks up in there. He said the whites and the Mexicans came together and took off on the blacks, and the blacks were extremely outnumbered, according to this story by Powder. And at the time, I ended up leaving a link to the story that he was telling, right? And to be honest, I was astonished at his honesty, because up to that point, all I did, in my opinion, is hear other races, when they spoke about blacks, they disparaged them, and they tried to paint them in a negative light. So to my surprise, Powder shared this story, and Powder was a former, at that time, I believe he may have been in PC at the telling of that story, right? But he was a former, he was affiliated to some racial white groups in prison, right? I don't remember exactly which, right? The story has since been taken down, but he told this story where the Mexicans and the whites came together, and they attacked these blacks in there. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, those blacks were either ghetto or they'd been fighting all their life, because they basically put hands all over the white dudes and the Hispanics, even though they rushed them with a surprise attack, and they were highly outnumbered, right? And so once again, like I say, I was just surprised to see publicly somebody else who wasn't black come on YouTube and talk about a victory that the blacks have. And some people may wonder, hey, Chill, well, why do you do these prison stories? You know, I don't do these stories to try to reignite animosity between the Hispanics and the blacks, the Crips, the Bloods. A lot of times, you know, I still have a few stories I haven't told intentionally, because they are about specific gangs out there on the street right now that are still beefing and historically have had long beefs with each other. So I try not to add fuel to the fire, you know, even though it's just a prison story. Some dude may be sitting out there chilling, doing whatever he's doing. He happens to hear the story, and it may, you know, inspire him to want to go and ride on the individuals that he's beefing with. When I do tell these stories, it's because people find this type of stuff intriguing. After all the time that I've done, I still myself listen to prison stories, you know. I still check out prison stories, federal prison stories, other individuals' YouTube channels, because I still, even though, like I said, I've done a lot of time myself, I'm still fascinated, and I find these stories interesting. So those individuals who want to know, you know, why I do prison stories, or I talk about that stuff, because obviously people find this type of stuff interesting, right? And so it's not to, you know, cause any turmoil or trouble or rehash any issues, right? To my understanding, the relations in prison are extremely better and different than how they was when I came in, and that's a good thing, right? And so but once again, the individual who posed that question, in my opinion, that was a very good question. A lot of times, you will hear about blacks taking the short end of the stick in certain situations, once again, because a lot of times these stories are not told by blacks. And also, keeping it 100, what plays a part in it is we have to give props to the Southsiders. A lot of times people want to say the Southsiders win riots due to their numbers. Well, that may play a part in it, right? But we cannot take away from the fact that the Southsiders are riders. You know what I'm saying? Bars. You know what I'm saying? The Southsiders are riders, right? And so their organization only enhances their ability to be victorious in these situations when you attack a group and that group is fighting from a disorganized standpoint. They're not, I've seen situations in prison, and let me say this before I even say that, right? If I was to come on here and lie and deviate from the truth, there would even be no point in me coming on here. That's how I feel. Just to come on here and tell you guys a lie, that wouldn't even make no sense. If I get into it, I talk stories about how I've been jumped in prison, how I've been cut on the back. You know what I'm saying? If I was to come in on here and lie, what good would that do, right? So I have been in situations where there is tension brewing among racial lines, and it involves the blacks and other races, right? And you've got 15 blacks over here, you got 20 sprinkled over there, you may have 30 over here from the Bay or whatever, instead of being together on a united front, right? And sometimes individuals will know these issues are brewing, and instead of coming up with a plan right then and there, dudes will tend to want to wing it and play things by ear. And so, of course, in those type of situations, if something kicks off, it's going to be harder for the blacks to win because they're divided. They're divided physically by the numbers. They might be divided by different ideologies on what to do. And then they're divided, in terms of, togetherness and no unity. So, of course, that's going to play a big part in that, right? And then once again, back to the Southsiders. I came to prison, right, at a time when things were very different, right? And so I have heard numerous stories of the Southsiders, showing an immense amount of heart, right? I heard a story about one time about two Southsiders who took their shirts off, I put Vaseline all over them and stuff at some point, right? And then I believe they ran up on the black weight pile. Each of these Southsiders had a knife in each hand. So you had like two Southsiders rush up and run over there and attack like a group of 25 to 30 blacks or however many individuals was on that weight pile, right? So, I mean, we're just giving credit where credit is due. Individuals in prison have heart. So you don't have to be from a particular organization to have heart. And so when there is no unity, sometimes it's going to be a little harder, when dudes are of different mindsets on how the problem should be handled. Nevertheless, me doing a lot of time, like I said, I know many individuals who have been in situations where the blacks came out victorious. I told you guys about a story when I was in Ironwood when we got into it on the basketball court with the Asians. The Asians, there was a full court basketball game. And so the Asians, some of them happened to be on the court that is normally on the side because it's a full court, a court down here and a court on the left side, a court on the left side, a court on the right side. The blacks normally played on the left side and the Mexicans played on the right side. And at this particular time, they was having a basketball tournament. So when a fight happened to break out on the side that the Mexicans the Southsiders normally played basketball on, but it was with the Asians. So the fight took place right in front of a building. So when the alarm went off and people looked outside and saw blacks fighting brown people on the side that the Hispanics normally play basketball on, it was assumed that the blacks and Southsiders were getting into it. So then something cracked off only in that specific building where dudes had a vantage point of looking outside and assuming the blacks and the Southsiders got into it. Now I'm outside involved in the melee with the blacks and the Asians. Inside it's the blacks and the Southsiders. To my understanding, the blacks came out extremely victorious on that fight inside the building. But once again, I wasn't involved in that fight. I'm outside involved in the fight against the Asians. And so I have many individuals who, tell stories about blacks being victorious in a lot of situations, right? And so maybe I'll interview some of these dudes. I got a friend who done about 18, 19 years straight in Cashapp, who according to this individual, the blacks, had a lot of victories down there. But once again, these are the dynamics and the things that go on in prison. So if you don't like hearing about these things, why even tune in to a prison show? Anyway, you already know what it is. It's your boy 16 to life. Resume normal program.